like, what did I just do? Your brain, your soul is saying that. What did I just do? I just left a comfy, cozy career and a place where I've been known for like almost 2 decades for the unknown. But then my spirit, the spirit side of me says, oh, this is a land of great opportunity because you're stepping off the map. So that balance between both and really embracing the uncertainty and the awe of the journey. When I first stepped off into this new adventure 3 years ago, the words of one of my late mentors is really ringing through my spirit, ringing through my mind, ringing through my body, ringing through my whole being, which is what he said to me many years ago. He said, Caleb, never lose the awe.
If you have ever looked around at your life and thought, this can't be it, you are in the right place. This is Flying Upstream, the podcast for people who refuse to live on autopilot. I'm your host, Kristen Medeiros. Each week, I sit down with people who questioned the rules, challenged the expectations, and chose a different path. Not because it was easy, but because it was honest. We talk about the moments that broke them open, the decisions that scared them, and the lives they built when they stopped doing what they were told and started listening to themselves. If you are done following the crowd and ready to trust your own way forward, stay with me. Let's fly upstream. Hey, free spirits. What if the things that frustrate you most, the patterns in your early life, and even your dreams are all trying to tell you the same thing? My guest today is Caleb Matthews. He is an international speaker, dream interpretation expert, and creator of the SSB method, a framework designed to help people understand their purpose through spirit, soul, and body. Caleb spent over a decade as a top performer in corporate telecom, winning awards and recognition while quietly knowing he was out of alignment. His journey eventually led him to sell his house, leave Canada, start over in Mexico, and build a life rooted in design rather than definition. This conversation is about questioning who gets to define success, trusting your internal signals, and learning to see the links already present in your life. Caleb, thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Kristen. Flying upstream. This is a wonderful conversation. I'm truly delighted and honored to be on the show. Thank you for the gracious invitation.
So excited here too. All right, let's just dive right in. Now, you were raised in a very unconventional way. You were homeschooled, you were exposed to dream interpretation and encouraged to think differently from a very young age. How did your early upbringing shape the way that you see purpose and success today?
My early upbringing really forced me in a good way to step back into MPA, multiple perspective advantage, and see life through a lens that I think a lot of us can really miss, which is the links, those C links in our day by day and our nightly lives that are always speaking to us. And I'm very thankful. I just want to be very clear. Nothing against people who go to public school. Everybody's got their own path, but I am very thankful for those homeschooling years because they developed what I call the I of I principle, which is something I'm really looking forward to getting into today as well.
Amazing. And, I especially want to take a moment to acknowledge that you're expressing such gratitude for your upbringing. A lot of people might say, homeschooled, oh, well, what a weirdo. Like, who does that? That's a strange thing to do. You probably have no social skills, you have no friends, right? Just jumping to those conclusions and making assumptions. But even the fact that you're having so much gratitude for your life and whatever that was for you, I'm sure everything has, positive and negative to it. Just starting out by having gratitude is such a nice way to begin the conversation, but also kind of sets the stage for what we're going to go on to talk about. So thank you for doing that.
Absolutely.
Okay. So you began public speaking as a teenager in places like the Philippines and across Africa. What did those early experiences teach you about people, culture, and the universality?
It's a common principle that no matter what country that we're in, no matter what state, no matter what people group we're speaking to, those Philippine and African years taught me something that about human dynamics and the construct that we live in that is all of us, no matter who we are, where we come from, have a three-part being. I'm strongly convinced of that. We have a spirit that lives in a mind that has a human body and an avatar. And that common thread of connecting the dots between spirit, soul, and body is really what was a commonality between all those different places. And I'm so thankful for those early years, especially the Philippines and Africa, because it launched my public speaking career. But two is it gave me an understanding and the confirmation from God that it doesn't matter where you are, whether you're in the dusty roads of Africa or whether you're speaking to people in the corporate boardroom meetings in North America. Everybody has a spirit, a soul, and a body, and are looking for that purpose and that sense of alignment in life. That's what those early years taught me, and I'm very grateful for them as they continue on in my adult life right now.
So I've heard people use spirit and soul interchangeably, but you're talking like they're different. How do you define them?
So spirit is conscience, wisdom, and understanding. And we all have heard that expression where you're following your gut instinct, right? Oh, I have a gut instinct that I shouldn't go out after dark. Or, oh, I have a gut instinct that I should pursue that opportunity. Maybe even if 99 out of 100 other people think, oh, that opportunity's got no ROI for you, no return on investment, but your gut feeling is telling you, no, go after that opportunity because there could be something there in that opportunity. That's your spirit speaking. Whereas your soul is more or less what your brain is processing of what's happening to you around you. So say I read a sign outside of a business that says the name of the business on it, and I read it, and I'm like, all right, I understand that this is a place where I need to go into to do banking or to do business. That's your soul talking, or your soul's like, oh, I really want to go and watch some television because I'm tired after work. Well, that's probably not your spirit talking. It's your soul's like, I want to rest. I want to be able to enjoy, and my soul be satisfied. I would say the difference between the spirit and the soul is your spirit is an unseen influence of your conscience, your wisdom, and your understanding speaking to you. That be from God, higher power, energy, creator, light. Everyone's got a different definition, but that's spirit. Your soul is when your brain and your own emotion is processing what's happening to you in the here and now within your control. That's what I would say is the opposing definitions in my perspective.
Okay. Thank you for clearing that. That makes a ton of sense. And so, kind of coming back to your career, you eventually spent over 10 years working in a large telecom corporation and you became one of their top sales performers. Now, for most people, they'd be like, so pumped. I made it. I'm at the top. From the outside, this looks like success, but internally, what felt off for you?
That I was not fully following my DNA of design. And what I mean by that is we can all be good at something. Like I'm good at sales, like I'm still good at sales. If I wanted to reinsert myself into the corporate world to 9 to 5 and go back into that, then I'd have an open runway to do that. I'm good at sales. But is sales something that fills me with joy and fulfillment and I feel like I'm making a difference long term, not just in the short term? Well, the answer to that question I came to is no, it's not. It's not fulfilling my DNA design. Why have I been created by God? Why have I been put here on this planet? And DNA of design is really all of us stepping back and saying, okay, why am I here? What's my purpose? And leaning into why, not necessarily what we're good at, but why and what fulfills us with joy and fulfillment. I want to share a brief little story just to back up my statement here because I'm always loving stories and podcasters. I know you love stories and our audience loves stories. Let's get into a little bit quick story here. And for me, when I was young, we talked about early in the conversation the I of I principle. And it's the perfect segue into that. The I of I principle stands for the early years of entrepreneurship, of innovation. So it's inviting us to look back into the early years of our lives as a story and say, okay, what is it about our early years that's going to set up the table for success for us as adults in our lives? And one of the first memories I can remember in my life actually was sitting on the front lawn as a 6 or 7 year old reading a children's storybook to drum roll to my first live breathing audience, the neighbor's black Labrador dog called Ace. And he's this friendly dog, and I'd just be sitting there, and he'd just be like, no judgment, just sitting there, listening, laughing, smiling. The dog, I'm convinced the dog, had a smile because I could see it in his face. and I was reading the story. And those early years of reading and sharing stories, and I mean, my brothers even called me TTM, talk too much. And that really set the table for, fast forward to 20 years ago, starting public speaking, doing podcasting in front of audiences. Those early years of joy of sharing stories, even to a neighbor's dog, as my first audience, set the table for what I'm doing now. So, all that to say is DNA of design. Look in the early years because they are clues to what we need to do as adults.
That's a really good direction to point. It's tough because I think so many people have had childhoods that were less than ideal, and those early years may not always be pleasant to go back to. And how do you tell somebody like, hey, you have to go revisit trauma
Mm.
or things that are really, really unpleasant. But hey, you'll come out better on the other side, but you have to go through this really difficult time first. How do you talk to people about that?
Yeah, that's a good segue, and I'm glad that you brought that up, Kristen, because it's true. Not everyone had a good upbringing, a solid home, good memories. Not everybody had that experience. And really, the way I look at that is two sides of a coin. So the coin theory of flipping. What comes against you, what comes against me, what comes against us defines us. So I'll use an example, just a made up character. Say Alexander has a childhood full of verbal bullying and psychological abuse and just an upbringing where no matter where he went in family or with friends, people always tried to cut him down and to silence his voice. Well, what I would say to Alexander is what comes against you, Alexander, defines you. What's the opposite of shutting down somebody's voice? It's giving somebody else a platform to speak and use their voice. So I would say to Alexander, there's something in your voice, Alexander, that you have to encourage people in the gift of communication that negative forces don't want you to share, because usually where the gold is where there's opposition. Look where the opposition is, you'll find the gold. So to people who did not have a good upbringing, I would say there's still gold in there, because the gold rush in in the United States history of the Alaska and California gold rush, you have to go through the muck. You have to go through the dirt to get the gold. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I love that analogy. That's very, very true. And as someone who lives in California, it makes a lot of sense to me. Absolutely. Okay, I want to pivot a little bit here because you made a very, very bold choice to sell your house in Canada, move to Mexico. Now, this was a place where you had no friends, no network, no income coming in. What was it like for you to start over in a place where you knew nothing and you knew no one?
Well, terrifying and exciting at the same time. It can be both, right? Yeah. Terrifying is okay, wow. Like, what did I just do? Your soul is saying that. What did I just do? I just left a comfy, cozy career and a place where I've been known for like almost 2 decades for the unknown. But then the spirit side of me says, oh, this is a land of great opportunity because you're stepping off the map. So that balance between both and really embracing the uncertainty and the awe of the journey. When I first stepped off into this new adventure 3 years ago, the words of one of my late mentors is really ringing through my spirit, ringing through my mind, ringing through my body, ringing through my whole being, which is what he said to me many years ago. He said, Caleb, never lose the awe for the adventure. Because if you lose the awe, if you lose the unknown of being embracing the unknown, then you've lost everything, because life is not meant to be fully understood. You have to step into the unknown. So for me, the awe of the journey was more attractive than the fear of actually undertaking it.
That's really beautiful. And I like that because it seems like you're kind of touching on what living in Mexico taught you about yourself, that staying comfortable in Canada and the life that you've known for a couple decades really never could.
Yeah, absolutely. The life in Canada, if I would pursue that for another few decades, it would treat me well, but it wouldn't be the best, because I often like to say this is that the enemy of the good is the God. In other words, When you're following in line with your full DNA of design, the God aspect, that is will be in opposition to what is good. Because for most people, good is acceptable. For 99% of people, good is okay, good is comfortable. But is it God? Is it actually what you're supposed to be doing? And that's where I decide I have to pivot. I have to go to Mexico. I have to extend my wings because if I stay in this environment, this land, this setting, this business, this career, then I'm not going to be able to face myself in the mirror at the end of my life and look at myself and say, was I a good steward of the talents that I've been given by God? If I stay, I'm not going to be able to answer yes. But if I go, then I'm going to be able to answer yes, that I tried everything within my power to accelerate and grow my gifts.
That's a great way to look at it too. Like good is fine for 99% of people, right? They're happy, they're living life status quo, and that's just totally fine for them. But I appreciate what you're saying that for you, that was just not okay. That was not the level you wanted to live your life. And taking this giant leap to Mexico was pretty inspiring and compelling for you to move you forward on that journey and that path. And out of that time came Sea Link and the itinerary Oasis kind of began to take shape. I want to dig into those a little bit. What is the core idea behind seeing the links in your life instead of forcing the predefined path?
Connecting the dots between your purpose and your calling. And I believe that most people just are living life on autopilot, like a hamster on a wheel, just accepting what's happening, accepting the circumstance, accepting, oh, well, this is just the way things are just going to be. I'm just going to have to accept it. Well, see link and seeing a link is being an active co-laborer and a participant with your purpose and your calling and with God and that spiritual aspect of really making practical spiritual strategy. So strategic strategy from spiritual to the natural. And in a culture of extremes, I believe that we live in we live in a huge culture of extremes. I think our audience would probably agree. I think you tend to agree with that. We live in extremes where either we're too strategic in our soul or we're too spiritual, but we're not actually bringing that practicality to our spirituality. So the C link is born out of this concept of making practical the spiritual and connecting the dots in our day by day, those divine nudges that we experience, and in understanding mysteries of this beautiful language of dreams in the night season, seeing the links and not just allowing life to happen to you, but standing back and saying, okay, what is this a picture of? What is my life trying to communicate with me on a day by day basis? That's the concept of C link.
I love that. And you teach what you call the matrix mindset. So, including the idea of construct, conform, and contract. Can you walk us through what that means in practical terms?
Construct, we are in a world system that is a huge, huge construct. And a couple of my favorite movies that I loved growing up watching in my homeschooling years and as a kid, it's crazy to even say that that was many decades ago, but The Matrix. The Matrix, and then The Truman Show, it's a classic with Jim Carrey as well. And the concept of each one of those is this world, that each of the characters are like confined inside of. And that's the world of the construct of the Matrix, the construct of the Truman Show, where Truman's living just in this scripted reality TV show. And that's a construct. The world that we live in today is a construct. The reality is that we're born for a time, we're born at a time, we live, and then eventually we will pass on. Like this timeline is not forever. So we're in a construct. And then in this construct, there is a conformity. There's that peer pressure that tries to say, oh, Kristen, Caleb, audience, in order for you to be successful, you got to do it like all the other successful people. You gotta do the formulas. You gotta do it the way that Tony Robbins is doing it, that Taylor Swift is doing. You gotta do it their way. Well, no, you don't have to do it their way. If you do it their way, it's going to be pretty sad. We live in a world full of Tony Robinses and Taylor Swifts. We already have one of each. That's enough. But there's only one of you and one of me. That's what we need to be able to walk in that, not and resist conformity. So we're in a construct. There's that conformity, and then there's that contract. And the final is we will ultimately make a decision of a contract one way or the other, whether it's for good or for evil. And when we decide that we're going to make an agreement with something, that will manifest in our lives. So if I look in the mirror and say, oh, Caleb, I just can't catch a break. I'm never going to be able to make this work. This business is just going to fail. No one's ever going to like what I have to say. If I say that long enough, my subconscious is going to listen to me. But if I tell myself that, no, this is good seed, this podcast I'm on is going to produce good seed. This person I connect with is going to influence other people. That one person that needs to hear me on this live stream is going to take away something. When I speak to myself in those terms, my subconscious is going to listen. So that's the construct. So that's a really quick elevator pitch of construct, conform, and contract. And we have to be aware of that we are in a construct. There is a conformity, peer pressure, and we ultimately have a decision of which contract we're going to make.
I appreciate that too, because it gives some framework to kind of the world we're in and choices that we have. And, along the lines of following what society tells us, people always think they need more knowledge, more credentials, another degree, when really they need is alignment.
Yep.
And what's the biggest mistake people make when they're trying to find their purpose?
Biggest mistake when people try to find their purpose is when they're looking through their dichotomous lens and not their trichotomous lens. And what I mean by that is they're looking for purpose only through what they can control. If it's outside of my control, I don't want it, is usually what human nature will tell us. Oh, if it's in the unknown or it's in the scary and oh my gosh, my heart's beating fast, I don't want to go in there, then usually people will tend to steer away from that. We tend to steer away from pain and from suffering and long-term ROI. That's our dichotomous soul speaking, our soul and our body. But the trichotomous being is when we ultimately follow that spiritual connection to our soul and our body and we say, God, I'm going to step out in faith here and I'm going to put my talents here and I'm going to trust that you back me up and that the unknown and embracing that unknown is going to be worth it. So I would say one of the greatest adversaries that we have is our soul gets in our way of our spirit. When our soul says, no, don't do it, when we're actually supposed to do it.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I also do want to touch on dream interpretations because this is a big part of what you do too, that you've interpreted thousands of dreams across cultures and belief systems. Why do you believe dreams, personal history, and daily frustrations are all pointing to the same underlying design?
Because dreams are one of the greatest roadmaps that we have. It's part of our personal history. It's a part of God's letter and blueprint for us to be able to actually follow that script to help us in our business, to help us in our lives, to help us in our individual purpose on the earth. I'm going to use a historical example because history speaks, and I got to back it up with history. Otherwise, our audience is thinking this is just Caleb's personal convictions and his beliefs. That's nice, but where is this in history? Well, let's go a little history lesson here because I love my history. I know, Kristen, sounds like you love your history too. But Harriet Tubman, the name of Harriet Tubman is famous in folklore in American history as in the Underground Railroad. She followed the Underground Railroad from Maryland to Pennsylvania to Canada and back. And 12 to 13 different voyages later, she was able to lead 200 or 300 slaves to freedom. And Harriet herself, she experienced visions and dreams at a young age. She experienced a lot of physical abuse by her slave masters, and some of that had to do with the trauma that she experienced, like PTSD, like just a lot of brain injury. But God used what the enemy meant for evil for good. So we talked about that earlier. What possible redemption? We talked about I of I principle. Can there be in those early years? Well, Harriet had the deck stacked against her. She was born in slavery. She had head trauma. Everything was stacked against her. And she decided one day that I'm going to either live or die, but I'm going to be free and I'm going to have one or the other. So she decided to run. One day she's like, I'm out of here. I'm going to run and I'm going to have one or the other, but I am going to be free. And when she would hide in the swamps and she would hide from her slave masters that were looking for her for shotguns and dogs trying to drag her back into this plantation, she would have these dreams and experiences. It's well documented in the night season where God would say, go to that house. Don't go to that house. You can trust that person. Don't trust that person. And she followed her dreams as a roadmap all the way to freedom. And that's a lot of what I just shared there. The public school system will not say because it sounds too mystical or, oh, that's too, too religious. Well, no, it has nothing to do with religion or being too mystical. It's the truth. It's exactly what Harriet's makeup was. And she followed dreams. So therefore, I say if Harriet Tubman can follow her dreams, we can follow our dreams as well. And there is a whole language waiting to be decoded. A third of our lives are spent in the dream state. There is a story to be unpacked there.
Mm. That's fascinating. I never knew that about her, but it makes a lot of sense. I think sometimes we hear stories, whether they're historical figures or even in our modern day lives, where we're like, wow, how did that person know? How could they do something that seems impossible, right? Like you had mentioned she made the trip south to the north, back and forth of multiple times. How could she be so lucky to never get caught, know the way, especially on super dark nights? How would she know?
Yeah.
But you're saying that she actually had information coming to her, and just because it wasn't in a form that most of us would accept, like a letter or someone telling her, it was in a dream, it doesn't negate the validity of it or how significant it was for her in her journey, and I appreciate that a lot.
100%.
Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful. All right, we're winding down here. I've got one last question for you, Caleb. You've been amazing. If someone listening today feels stuck, disconnected, or unsure whether they are allowed to choose a different definition of success, what's the very first step you would invite them to take?
Well, I want to invite them to take a few steps, but the first step I would say would be to go to my website, calebmatthews.net/ the DNA of design quiz. I think that's the URL, and take the purpose design quiz where it actually be able to unpack your design prototype. There's 5 different prototypes right now. I may update it to 7, but there's 5, and it's a free quiz. You can try that out and see really where your gift mix is. If you don't know where to start and you're like, I have no idea where I'm talented or what my gifting is or what my function and abilities are, I'd want you to start with that DNA of design quiz. I'll have the QR code and the links sent to Kristen, of course, after the show, and you can dive into that. But first thing is discovering what your design is, what your design type is. And then I would say practically is following along with the C links journey in your own life of putting together those pieces of the puzzle, connecting the dots and asking yourself, what is this a picture of? One practical activation I can give to you as you're leaving today, this podcast, is step back, push away all the clouds of busyness and uncertainty and say, what is this a picture of? What did I see in my day to day that's communicating to me a message that's beyond the natural? What did I see in that dream I had last night that is communicating something to me about my design, my life, and what I'm supposed to be doing? And write it down, journal it. I cannot emphasize that enough. Most people wake up in the morning from a dream and don't journal it. They expect to remember it later. Most of the time, that's going to fizzle right out. And so write it down, be very clear, and start to be intentional with engaging and partnering with, the DNA of your design and seeing the links. But I would say that. And of course, my newsletter, Seek the Link. We'll also have that in the links in the comments for you to follow along my journey here a couple times a month and inspire you as the audience. The free newsletter is no cost to it. I want to provide you as much value as possible. But audience, my concluding words to you as I hand it back to Kristen is this: is don't disqualify yourself from walking in your full design. Don't disqualify yourself. Follow your conscience, because to go against conscience is neither right nor safe. Embrace your full being, your spirit, your soul, and your body, and be an active participant. Thank you, Kristen, so much for having me on the show. It's been a delight.
That's beautiful. Caleb, thank you so much for bringing your perspective, your depth, and your lived experience to this conversation. I appreciate so much that you're challenging the idea that success has to look the same for everyone. We know it doesn't. And for offering people a language to understand themselves more clearly. The way that you interpret and connect dreams, history, and the embodiment gives people permission to trust what they already feel but may not yet know how to articulate. Caleb, I'm really grateful for your time today. Thank you so much for putting all this beautiful work out into the world.
Thank you very much. A delight. And hey, listeners, if you have feedback for me and you're like, I'm experiencing something I got questions for, then you can keep in touch with me with the links provided.
If today's conversation sparked something in you, take a moment to sit with it. You can find more episodes and resources at flyingupstreampodcast.com. And if this show speaks to you, the best way to support it is to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who is ready to question the path they are on. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and always keep flying upstream.